Gavin Newsom stepped to the microphone with a perfectly rehearsed script. But Donald Trump didn't bring a script. He brought a sledgehammer, and by the time the night was over, the political landscape of California had been fundamentally altered. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. As someone who has spent decades navigating the treacherous waters of politics, both behind the podium as a candidate and now sitting here behind this desk as your host, I have seen every kind of debate strategy imaginable. I have seen the polished debaters, the policy wonks, the aggressive challengers, and the defensive incumbents. But what we witnessed on that stage between the governor of California and the former president was not a debate. It was an absolute dismantling. It was a masterclass in political stagecraft, psychological dominance, and the ruthless exploitation of a political opponent's vulnerabilities. Let us walk through exactly what happened, because the history books will study this night for a very long time. The debate had originally been Governor Newsom's idea. His team had undoubtedly spent 6 grueling weeks gaming out every conceivable scenario. They had prepared for the insults. They had braced for the interruptions. They had anticipated the nicknames. Their underlying calculation was simple, and in conventional political warfare, it made sense. If Newsom could just stay calm, stay anchored to his policy points, and allow the visual contrast between his polished presidential temperament and Trump's unpredictable reality television chaos to do its work, the night would be his. For the first 3 minutes, that calculation appeared to hold. Newsom delivered his opening statement flawlessly. His shoulders were squared, his jawline angled toward the camera with the practiced precision of a man who has been the best-looking person in every room for 20 years and knows exactly how the light catches his features. His voice was smooth, his hand gestures were meticulously measured, and his talking points hit absolutely every mark. He spoke of investment, of innovation, of the grand California model. He played those familiar notes the way a concert pianist plays a song he has rehearsed 1,000 times. But then the atmosphere shifted. Governor Newsom's mouth was moving, but the sound simply wasn't landing. The 1,800 people packed into that auditorium were making a noise they had been making for the last 4 seconds, a rolling, building wall of laughter and applause that started somewhere in the cheap seats in the back rows and surged forward like a tidal wave, swallowing everything in its path. It consumed whatever the governor of California was trying to articulate into a microphone that was working perfectly, yet delivering his voice to absolutely no one. Newsom raised his right hand in that open-palmed, 5-fingered gesture he had deployed in 1,000 press conferences, the universal political signal for "let me finish." And that hand just hung there in the air, waiting for a room that was never coming back to him. Just 6 feet away, Donald Trump was leaning into his own microphone. He wore the settled, unhurried, deeply recognizable satisfaction of a heavyweight fighter who has just landed the knockout punch he had been loading up since the moment he walked out from behind the curtain. His body language told the entire story. Shoulders back, chin raised, one hand casually adjusting a tie that did not need adjusting. He looked entirely like a man who owned this room, who owned every room he had ever walked into, and who had never once in his entire life stood on a stage wondering whether the audience was with him. The moderator, seated at her desk, had set her pen down 90 seconds ago and hadn't even bothered to pick it back up. The structure of the debate had entirely dissolved. "Tell them about the French Laundry, Gavin," Trump said. His voice cut through the overwhelming noise of the crowd, not by being louder than the roar, but the way a foghorn cuts through thick fog, by being exactly the frequency the fog was expecting. "They want to hear about the French Laundry. What you have to understand about political dominance is that it is deeply physical. Trump did not just lean, he stepped. He took 2 full steps to his right, moving away from his wooden lectern and out into the open center of the stage. He moved closer to the audience, closer to Newsom, suddenly occupying the kind of open space that a debate podium is specifically designed to prevent a candidate from occupying. He reached up with his left hand and undid his jacket button. It was entirely casual, the gesture of a man settling in for a very long, very entertaining evening. His right hand came up, index finger extended, pointing at nothing in particular but somehow everything in general. "So, Gavin, Governor Newsom," Trump began, surveying the room. "I should be polite. Very presidential. Very dignified." He adjusted his tie again and looked out at the audience. It wasn't a nervous glance, it was an audit. It was the look of a man counting the house, ensuring every single seat was full and every face was pointed directly at him. "Gavin wants to be president. That's why we're here. He wants a promotion from California to the whole country. And I think before we promote anybody, we should probably check the resume, right? You check references. You look at the track record. You see if the guy did a good job. The turn he made toward Newsom was slow and intensely theatrical. His whole body rotated like a battleship turret locking onto a target. Shoulders, hips, feet, every piece of the machine aligned directly toward the man standing rigidly behind his podium, standing exactly where a man stands when he desperately hopes the wood and microphones will protect him. "Gavin, let's check the resume," Trump said. $31 billion. Trump's right hand chopped the air in a short, downward motion, like a carpenter driving a nail flush with his palm. 31 billion. Billion with a B. That's how much money California's unemployment office, the EDD they call it, lost to fraud. He paused, letting the number hang in the air. Not spent, not invested, lost. To criminals, to fraud rings, to people who don't exist. His hand came up again, finger pointed sharply at the ceiling, signaling the twist. And here's the part you won't believe. To people who do exist. In prison. The word prison came out with a heavy, downward inflection that made it land like a gavel. Down in the 7th row, the cameras caught a man in a blue blazer turning to the woman beside him, mouthing something in sheer disbelief. The woman shook her head slowly, the way citizens do when a number simply exceeds the space available in the human brain to comprehend it. $810 million in unemployment checks went to prisoners. In prison. Behind bars. Sitting in their cells collecting unemployment checks like they're on vacation. Trump continued, feigning absolute bewilderment. I've been in business my whole life. My whole life. I've never heard of anything like this. You can't make this up. Even I couldn't make this up, and I'm a very creative person. Very creative. The audience began laughing. But as I watched from the monitor, I noticed it wasn't the sharp, surprised laugh of a traditional punchline landing. It was the slow, rolling laughter of accumulating absurdity. It was the sound of a failure so catastrophically complete, involving a number so astronomically large, that the human body simply runs out of other options and defaults to laughter. And here's the beautiful part, Trump added, leaning in. And I say beautiful because you have to appreciate the incompetence. It's almost artistic. 1,700 claims came from one address, one building. He swept his hand horizontally, illustrating the general vicinity where common sense used to reside. The federal government called California and said, "Hey, you might have a problem. Maybe check on the building with 1,700 unemployment claims." You know what California did? He paused, opening both hands wide and delivering an exaggerated full-body shrug, the kind that involves the shoulders, the eyebrows, and the corners of the mouth all at once. Nothing for 6 months. He turned sharply back to Newsom. The cameras zoomed in. Newsom's hands were gripping the edges of his podium, his knuckles turning white, a grip so tight it was visible from the 4th row. "Gavin, I fire people in 6 minutes. You waited 6 months." Newsom immediately leaned into his microphone. To his credit, his pitch remained smooth and even. He had clearly been briefed on this exact line of attack. He had a response chambered and ready to deploy. "Mr. President," Newsom countered, "California has invested record amounts in fraud prevention and recovery. We've recovered over $1 billion. Record amounts." It was a fatal rhetorical mistake. Before the sentence was even finished, Trump was moving. 2 quick steps toward center stage, both hands up, palms open, like a baseball player casually catching a ball tossed directly into his glove. "He loves that word," Trump shot back. "Record. $24 billion on homeless. Record. $31 billion stolen. Record. California breaks records every day. Every day. But they're all disaster records." He pointed at Newsom with the distinct look of a man pointing at a menu item he absolutely refuses to eat. "He's not breaking records. Records are breaking him." The auditorium erupted. 1,800 people suddenly produced a unified wall of noise that transcended polite political applause and transformed into the roar of a stadium sporting event. People were physically shifting forward in their seats, turning to their neighbors, clapping in overlapping rhythms that merged into one sustained sonic boom. Newsom attempted to deliver his next sentence, but he walked right into that wall of sound and vanished inside it, completely invisible. Then Trump executed a brilliant pivot. He walked slowly back to his podium and placed both hands on it. It was the very first time he had touched his podium since the debate began. As a broadcaster, I can tell you that this simple physical gesture instantly changed the atmospheric pressure in the room. It was like a professor closing a heavy textbook. The hands on the wood meant, I am about to be serious. The audience, which had been roaring with laughter, went dead quiet. They recognized the cue. I want to talk about something that's not funny, Trump said, his voice dropping half a register. The Queen's accent remained, the familiar cadence was there, but the flamboyant showmanship receded like a tide pulling back to reveal the jagged rocks underneath. And the rocks were numbers. Homelessness in California. $24 billion. The governor spent $24 billion on homelessness between 2018 and 2022. That's more than most countries spend on their entire military. He held up one hand, all 5 fingers spread wide. You know what happened? Homelessness went up, not down. Up 31%. Nationwide, across the rest of the country, homelessness went down 10%. Same years, same pandemic, same economy. The country got better. California got 31% worse. Down in the audience, a woman in a red jacket held her phone in her lap. The screen was dark. She wasn't filming. She was just holding it the way people hold an object when their brain is deeply processing devastating information and their hands need something to anchor them. California has 12% of the country's population and 33% of the homeless. Trump continued relentlessly. 1 out of every 3 homeless Americans is in California, and this man spent $24 billion and made it worse. He looked directly at Newsom. Newsom's posture had shifted. He was now leaning slightly away from the podium. His weight shifted awkwardly to his back foot. It is the subconscious posture of a man who has just been struck by something incredibly heavy, his body reacting before his face can mask it. Where did the money go, Gavin? Trump demanded. I'm a businessman. When I spend $24 billion, I expect to see something. A building, a hotel, a very tall, very beautiful building. You spent $24 billion, and you have more people sleeping on sidewalks than when you started. Trump's hands remained locked on the podium. The tone was still deadly serious. 41 cents of every dollar went to administration, consultants, overhead, salaries. Not to the homeless, to the people who manage the homeless. The helpers got $10 billion, the homeless got tenths. Then Trump stepped back. His hands came off the podium. He adjusted his tie once more. The showman was returning to the stage slowly, the way a worker puts his heavy jacket back on after carrying a crushing load. Record amounts, record failure. And then, there's the fires. He was moving again, commanding the center stage, his hands channeling the restless energy of a man whose physical instincts are sharper than any teleprompter. Last year, Gavin cut the fire budget, $100 million from wildfire prevention. And what happened? He held both hands out, palms up to the sky. The fires came. The biggest fires in LA history. 12,000 buildings, homes, schools, churches, gone. He held up a single index finger. But here's the part I love. This is my favorite part. His own office, not Republicans, not Fox News. His own office reported how many acres they treated with fire prevention. The fuel breaks, the prescribed burns, all the things you do so the fire doesn't eat your state. He leaned incredibly close to the microphone, his voice dropping into a conspiratorial, near whisper that everyone in the room recognized as the loading mechanism for a massive punchline. They overstated it by 690%. He let the number marinate for a full beat. 690, not 10, not 50, 690%. They said they did 8 times more fire prevention than they actually did. Trump turned to Newsom, and his expression wasn't angry. It was closer to genuine admiration, the awe of a man encountering a level of sheer incompetence so astronomical that it achieves a twisted kind of grandeur. Gavin, I've been in real estate my whole life. I've written some very optimistic brochures, beautiful brochures, the best brochures, but I have never been off by 690%. If I sold a 1-bedroom and said it was an 8-bedroom, I'd be in jail. The laughter returned, rolling through the aisles, while the cameras, now shooting from 2 distinct angles, caught Newsom gripping his podium so tightly his knuckles were completely white. But Trump wasn't done. He walked to the exact geometric center of the stage, equidistant from both podiums, equidistant from both sides of the audience. He commanded the room because he fundamentally believed the room was constructed for him. They tell me character matters, Trump said, smoothing his jacket. I hear it all the time. Character, character, character. So, let's talk about Gavin's character. He paused, In broadcasting, we call this the pregnant pause. It wasn't for thinking, it was purely for timing. It's the silence a comedian uses right before the hammer drops. Knowing the quiet makes the impact exponentially harder. November 2020, Trump began, his voice now conversational, intimate, like a dinner party guest setting the table before delivering a shocking piece of gossip. Gavin tells every family in California, don't have Thanksgiving together, stay home. It's too dangerous, don't see grandma, don't see grandpa. Keep your kids away from the people who love them most. He held up one finger. Same week, same week. Gavin goes to the French Laundry. The audience let out a low murmur. It was the sound of a room that already knows the story but desperately wants to hear this specific man tell it. You know the French Laundry, Trump smiled. $350 a plate. That's per plate, not per table. He goes there with lobbyists. Lobbyists for a birthday party. Big group, no masks, sitting close, drinking wine that costs more than most people's car payment. He leaned back into the microphone, his voice dropping into that dangerous register where the safety is clicked off. And then, this is where you really see the talent. He tells the press it was outdoors. Trump threw his arms wide open, his full wingspan extended. I've seen the photos. That is not outdoors. I know outdoors. I own outdoors. I have golf courses in Scotland that, he pointed casually in Newsom's direction, is a private dining room with a very expensive ceiling. The room exploded. In the fourth row, a man was physically wiping tears from his eyes. In the seventh row, the woman in the red jacket had finally turned her phone screen on and was frantically showing something to the man beside her. The moderator's pen remained untouched on the desk. Grandma can't have Thanksgiving? Gavin has lobster at $350 a plate with lobbyists. That's California in one sentence, Trump declared. He walked slowly back to his podium. He didn't stand behind it. He leaned against it, resting one elbow on the top edge. It was the posture of a man shifting into the late-night phase of the evening, where the stories get intensely personal and the laughter fades into uncomfortable reality. Gavin was mayor of San Francisco, Trump continued softly. Good job, important job. And he had a campaign manager, his best friend, a guy named Alex Tork. Good guy, loyal, working day and night, knocking on doors, making calls, raising money, doing everything a best friend does when his best friend wants to be mayor. The audience felt the shift. When Donald Trump slows down his cadence, it means he is taking careful aim. And Gavin had an affair with the man's wife. The laughter vanished. Instantly. What rushed in to fill the vacuum was a dense, hyper-focused attention. 1,800 people who had just spent 20 minutes being wildly entertained suddenly realized the comedy show was over, and a brutal, undeniable truth was being laid bare. Alex Tork's wife, Ruby, who also worked for Gavin. She was his appointment secretary, his subordinate, his employee, his best friend's wife. Trump laid out the facts methodically, still leaning casually on his elbow. The relaxed physical posture paired with the devastating words was the entire point. Alex found out, resigned, marriage destroyed. Gavin said, and I want to say this exactly, everything you've heard and read is true and I am deeply sorry. Trump stood up straight, abandoning the podium completely. He walked directly toward the audience, ignoring Newsom entirely. He moved toward the crowd the way a pastor walks down the aisle toward his congregation. You know who Gavin's wife was before all this? Before the affair? Before the French Laundry? Before any of it? He delivered a shape-shifting pause. Kimberly Guilfoyle. A jolt of electricity surged through the auditorium. Heads turned, elbows nudged ribs. It was the shared voltage of thousands of people simultaneously connecting two explosive facts they had somehow never put together before. Kimberly left Gavin, Trump said, savoring the moment. She left. He timed the next sentence like a demolition expert wiring a bridge. And she got upgraded, significantly upgraded. She went from Governor French Laundry to the Trump family. That is the biggest upgrade in political history, maybe in world history. The roof nearly came off the building. It wasn't the slow laugh of the unemployment segment or the sharp gasp of the fire statistics. It was a full-throated, foot-stomping, roof-shaking eruption. It was the kind of defining political punchline that people will repeat at dinner parties for the next decade. Through the deafening noise, the broadcast cameras isolated Gavin Newsom. His polished smile was entirely gone. It hadn't just faded, it had been evacuated. What remained was the raw face of a politician who has been hit with a reality he cannot spin, because every possible response simply drags him deeper into the one conversation he is desperate to avoid. Silence was his only escape route, and silence is the one political skill Gavin Newsom never mastered. Trump stood entirely still in the center of the stage, absorbing the thunderous applause like a maestro, fueled by the absolute certainty that the room and the moment belonged entirely to him. Then, with a subtle motion, he brought the energy back down. "But I want you to think about Alex Turk," Trump said softly. The room quieted in layers, the back rows first, then the middle, then the front, like ripples settling on a pond. The friend. The man who worked for Gavin, who trusted Gavin, who came home one day and found out his wife was sleeping with his boss. Trump's voice was now at its absolute quietest, the rare register that audiences hear the least but remember the longest. That man is still in San Francisco. He rebuilt, he moved on. But he carries it. 20 years later, he carries it. And the man who did it to him, the man who betrayed his best friend, that man wants to be president of the United States. He looked directly at Newsom. Character matters, that's what they tell me. Moving back behind his podium, Trump gripped it with both hands, shifting his weight forward to signify the final, fatal blow of the night. I want to get serious for a moment. People are leaving California. 4 words, stripped of any rhetorical ornament. For the first time in the history of the state, the population is declining. People are packing trucks, loading kids, driving east, to Nevada, to Texas, to Arizona, to anywhere that isn't California. He let the tragic imagery settle, the endless eastbound highways full of families giving up on the Golden State. Tesla left. Oracle left. Hewlett-Packard Enterprise left. These companies built Silicon Valley, and they left. Not because of the weather. The weather is beautiful, perfect weather. They left because Gavin made it impossible. $26,478. That's how much more a middle-class family pays to live in California versus the national average per year. That's not a policy difference, that's a punishment. Trump paused, and then he deployed the phrase the audience had been waiting for all night. The phrase that had been trending online before the microphones were even turned on. The shorthand for absolute bureaucratic failure. His expression shifted into something highly dangerous. The look of a debater who cannot believe his sheer luck that this specific boondoggle exists. 2008, Trump recalled. They tell California, we're building a bullet train from San Francisco to LA, fast, modern like Japan. Vote for it, give us the money, we'll build the future. Both hands came up in disbelief. It's 2026, 18 years later. You know what they have? The crowd leaned forward, practically vibrating. They knew exactly what was coming, but they needed to hear him say it. A piece of track in the Central Valley that goes from Bakersfield to Merced. The laughter started before the sentence was even finished. It was the joyous laughter of a shared inside joke delivered with absolute, unapologetic commitment. Nobody is going from Bakersfield to Merced, Trump laughed. I say this with great love for the people of Bakersfield and the people of Merced. Wonderful people, great people. But nobody is taking a $100 billion bullet train between them. Newsom's hands were no longer on the podium. They were folded quietly in his lap. He looked like a man who had simply let go of the steering wheel. $100 billion for a train that was supposed to cost $33 billion and take 10 years. It's been 18 years, and they've built a track that goes from a place nobody wants to leave to a place nobody wants to go. Trump walked back to his podium, placed his hands firmly on the wood, and for the first time all night, he looked away from the audience, away from Newsom, and stared dead center into the camera lens. He looked directly at the 40 million people sitting on the other side of the glass. So here's my question. The only question, he said, his voice dropping into the basement of his register, stripping away the entertainer to reveal the cold, hard executive. $31 billion stolen. Homelessness up 31%. Fire budget cut, numbers faked by 690%. Best friend's wife. French Laundry. Population leaving, businesses gone. $100 billion train to nowhere. He turned his eyes slowly back to Newsom. And you want a promotion? He adjusted his tie one last time. Gavin, in my world, in the real world, not the Sacramento world, not the French Laundry world, when you lose that much money and that many people and that many buildings, you don't get promoted. A devastating pause. You get fired. An even longer pause. And you're lucky. In my world, I'd fire you on television. He looked back at the live audience. 1 beat, 2 beats. The corners of his mouth curled upward. Actually, I just did. When the moderator finally called for Governor Newsom's closing statement, it was an exercise in pure futility. He delivered his 2 minutes of focus group tested, perfectly polished prose about the California dream, investing in tomorrow, and rejecting the politics of division. His hand gestures were flawless. His vocal pitch was perfect. But the 1,800 people in the auditorium were politely staring at their smartphones. In the 3rd row, a man was already texting a video clip to his brother. In the 9th row, a woman was literally Googling the price of a French laundry tasting menu. In the back row, a college student had already clipped the Kimberly Guilfoyle line and uploaded it to a platform where it would outlive us all. Newsom finished, and the applause that followed was the rhythmic, hollow clapping of an audience fulfilling a basic social obligation. Nobody actually heard his closing statement because the debate had effectively ended 20 sentences earlier. Trump just stood there, hands folded, watching the governor the way a cat watches a bird flutter against a closed window, with mild interest, zero urgency, and the cold reality that the outcome was decided long ago. The political fallout was immediate and catastrophic. Within 24 hours, Governor French laundry was the #1 trending topic in the nation. The Kimberly Guilfoyle exchange racked up 8 million views and counting. Kimberly herself dropped a masterclass in modern political warfare. She posted a single emoji on Instagram. No caption, no comment, no context. It received 1.2 million likes in half a day. It was the most efficient, devastating political communication of the decade. 1 character, 0 words. Total destruction. Newsom's rapid response team desperately released a statement condemning the night as a substance-free reality TV performance designed to entertain rather than inform. But notice what the statement didn't do. It didn't address the $31 billion. It didn't address the 690% fire prevention exaggeration. It didn't mention the $24 billion that resulted in a 31% spike in homelessness. And it certainly didn't mention Alex Tork. They attacked the tone because tone is subjective. Numbers are unforgiving. Meanwhile, Bakersfield to Merced instantly entered the American lexicon as a shorthand meme for any bloated, doomed government project that costs too much, takes too long, and connects absolutely nothing to absolutely nothing. A parody Amtrak schedule went viral, listing the route at $100 billion a ticket with a departure time of TBD 2045. It was shared 400,000 times before the sun came up. Within a week, Newsom's national favorability plummeted 7 points. 3 prominent California business owners went on Fox Business and specifically cited the debate as the exact moment they finalized their decision to move their operations out of state. A commercial real estate analyst in San Jose quietly published a report noting a 23% spike in office vacancy inquiries in the Bay Area the following week. The report didn't explicitly link the spike to the debate. It didn't have to. Within a month, the governor's office quietly scrubbed the high-speed rail construction timeline from their official website, brushing it off as a routine update. No new milestones were ever listed. And Donald Trump? At a rally in Phoenix a few days later, he mentioned Newsom exactly once. "How's the train, Gavin? Has it left Bakersfield yet?" The crowd roared. Trump adjusted his tie and he moved on to the next thing, because with him, there is always a next thing, and the next thing is always his. But there is one final piece to this story, a human element that gets lost in the polls and the viral clips. As the political world burned, in a quiet, glass-walled office on the 14th floor of a building in San Francisco's financial district, Alex Tork sat at his desk. The television was off. His phone lay face down on a stack of commercial real estate proposals. This was the business he had meticulously built over 15 years, one client and one handshake at a time, in the exact same city where he was once the most trusted man in the mayor's inner circle, before he left it all behind on a single afternoon, carrying nothing but a resignation letter. His phone had been vibrating relentlessly since 9 o'clock. When he finally turned it over, the screen glowed with 17 unread messages from 17 different numbers, all asking the exact same question in various forms of punctuation. Did you see? He had not seen. He stopped watching Gavin Newsom on television 20 years ago. He stopped on the precise afternoon that the word everything came out of his best friend's mouth. Everything you've heard and read is true. That single word, everything, included his wife, his career, his closest friend, and the entire version of his life that had existed before that sentence was spoken. For 2 decades, he had rebuilt. He remarried. He raised children who called him dad and truly meant it. He built a successful business that paid the mortgage, kept the lights on, and gave him a reason to wake up at 6 in the morning that didn't involve dwelling on the man who had shattered his world. He moved forward, the way humans are forced to move forward when every other direction leads straight back into the darkest day of their lives. You put one foot in front of the other until the sheer distance between that day and the present moment is vast enough to be called moving on, even if your body still remembers what the calendar has tried so hard to forget. And yet tonight, 40 million people had heard his name. Not just his name, but his trauma. The story of the loyal friend, the betrayed campaign manager, the husband who came home to a nightmare, broadcast live by a man who possessed the massive platform and the total absence of restraint required to hurl it across the globe, right into the face of the man who had caused the pain. Alex picked up his phone, stared at the 17 unread messages, read absolutely none of them, and set the phone gently back down on the real estate proposals. Outside his window, the city of San Francisco stretched out toward the bay in the fading evening light. The iconic skyline, the majestic bridges, the fog beginning its nightly march through the Golden Gate, moving with the cold indifference of a natural phenomenon that couldn't care less who was sitting in the mayor's office, the governor's mansion, or the Oval Office. The city was still breathtakingly beautiful. It was still broken in all the places it had always been broken. And for now at least, it was still Gavin's city. Alex reached over, switched off the small desk lamp, and picked his coat up from the back of his chair. It was a good coat, the coat of a man who had survived and rebuilt. He put it on, buttoned it quietly, and walked out to the elevator. Some burdens you carry for 20 years, and some burdens eventually carry you. The profound difference between the two isn't something you can fully understand until the 20 years are up. Alex wasn't sure if his 20 years were over yet. He wasn't entirely sure they would ever be over. That is the devastating truth about betrayal that no one ever tells you in politics or in life. It doesn't heal on a schedule. It heals when it heals, or sometimes it just doesn't. He pressed the button. The elevator arrived. The doors opened and he stepped inside. The city was still there when the heavy doors slid closed. It would be there when he got home, and it would be there tomorrow.